We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. A little bit annoyed, obviously, about the weekend. Just weird about a fan, Shane, especially as you're an analyst, is there was a part of me that was like, and this is a very bad part of being an Eagles fan, but I was like, maybe a loss is not the worst thing in the world. Maybe they needed to realize that what they were doing was not sustainable. Because it's all very well people like us coming on the show and talking about how the offense is wrong, but people can just say, well, they're 4-0, they're 4-0. And I was like, yeah, but they weren't 4-0 good. The numbers on the offense are like, and I'm sure everyone knows who's listening, they are atrocious. Like, they are bad than like the worst offenses like the Titans and stuff on like 3-and-outs and stuff. Like, you can't win a Super Bowl. You can't be that good playing that sustainable offense. Like, it's not sustainable. So in a weird way, I was like, rather than fluke out another win, like, imagine if they catch the Hail Mary, and this week's very different. It's like, obviously we wanted to win, but a GGN 10 comment, yeah, I think we needed a bit of humbling. I think coaches needed humbling. I think they can't just expect to win these games. They have to realize that simply they have to be better. So yeah, frustrating loss, but also like not the end of the world in the grand scheme of things. Tough first 5 fixtures to go 4-1. I am fascinated by tomorrow because it's a short week, but I think they have to make some changes. So I think we might get an idea like quite quickly if things are going to change. But yeah, how do you think about it? I guess you didn't watch live this week, did you?
I did not.
So you knew they lost going into it as well. Probably
no,
a little bit
I did
less.
not.
You didn't. You hit it.
Yeah, when I'm not able to watch live, I turn everything off so I don't find out. And so I didn't know going into it what happened. I got to experience that letdown alongside everybody else just a couple hours later.
That's what I do when I watch in the mornings. That would be me Friday morning as well. That would be me getting up at 5 a.m. Yeah, Thursday night games suck more than anything, and nothing makes it even worse than being from the UK means I can't watch them live either. So not only do I spend all week working because I have to do everything in 3 days, then don't even get to watch the game live. So it's just great fun. It's I hate Thursday night games. Ban them. Yeah, breaded lips, that stat, I mean, commenting in 20% of drives result in 0 on negative. It's horrendous. But you know what, Shane? Do you know what it said we were going to do last week? This defense, this offense doesn't deserve our takes. So despite everyone tuning in probably wanting us to moan about the offense, they're going to go second today because they don't deserve to start. We can't start every pod with the same thing. And in all honesty, some of my offensive takes are probably going to be quick this week because a little bit will be like...
I don't believe you. Your takes are never quick.
We'll see. But a lot of these things are going to be like, it's the same as we've said every single week. There's only so many times we can say the same things. But anyway, shall we start with the defensive side this week?
Let's do it. So we are going to hop in and talk defense first this week. Why don't I lead us off and talk about Kelee Ringo? A lot of you guys got a lot of Kelee Ringo information a week ago when Eric did a Kelee Ringo player spotlight. And so he got to start, for the second week in a row. And it seemed like that was a decision that they made because Adoree Jackson did come in later in the game, so he was healthy. And I just wanted to point out some things that I saw from Ringo. And a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. Overall, I would keep playing him. But Kelee Ringo down at the bottom of the screen here, and he's going to give up a curls, comeback, whatever you want to call it route here. But I just want you to watch. This is one of Ringo's biggest issues. And so see where he's starting off here. He's about 3 yards shy of the 40-yard line. And watch how far he backpedals before he drop steps. So really only about 3.5 yards, right? So he's only backpedaling from off coverage about 3.5 yards before he opens up his hips to run. And once he does that, it's game over. He doesn't have that hip fluidity. And the thing is, Ringo's fast. Like, he doesn't have to drop step and turn to run that early on in the rep. And I'm going to show you 2 other examples of him doing it later later in this. But before that, because I just went in chronological order, he's at the top of the screen here, and this is a poor rep in the run game. Just watch the angle he takes. I'm not sure what he's doing, because like he's on a track to cut this off, and then he like hesitates and comes inside. And, fortunately, Cooper DeJean grabs the jersey there, and Ringo's ultimately not needed on the play, but this could have easily been him giving up the edge in a pretty big way if DeJean wasn't able to grab a hold there. So that's something to talk about. But then I want to show you 2 examples of him doing a better job on these vertical routes. And it's not just because these both go vertical, but watch him on this play. He's at the 42, or excuse me, he's 3 yards shy of the 50, and watch how far he backpedals. Like, he goes almost an extra 1.5 to 2 yards before he opens his hips to run there. And he still, with ease, is able to stay on top of the receiver. And then this next one at the top of the screen, he's actually going to backpedal. He's at the 50. He's going to backpedal almost 7 yards this time before he opens his hips to run. And he's still able to stay in phase. Now, he doesn't do a good job of getting his head around there, and that flag was picked up, by the way, as it should have been. It wasn't a strong play back into him, but you open yourself up to that, as we all saw in the Jags-Chiefs game Monday night, when you're not turning around to find the ball. So he does need to work on that, but he has speed to be able to stay in that back pedal longer. And I thought some of his worst plays, other than like tackling related things, are when he's opening those hips to run too early. But overall, I thought it was a fine performance from Ringo. There was some bad. There was some good, though, and I think it's enough that I would continue to play him.
Yeah, I sort of went into the game expecting the worst because obviously the 2-point conversion was poor. And then I sort of... Yeah,
I meant to put that clip in, and I forgot, and then I didn't have time to add it in.
If you want to look at it, it's right to the bottom of my film thread. So it would be like one of the very, very last plays.
Yeah,
it might even
you
be
can't lose
play.
Outside here. 2-point conversion, it's condensed. He's likely condensing to run outside, and if he is crossing, there's bodies in the middle at least. So yeah, that's a good shout on that one. That was a bad rep from Ringo. So, you can't lose outside there.
I don't mean this in a nasty way, but I think he's a bit like naive's the wrong words. Stupid's obviously way too harsh, but I don't think I think his body's better than his mind a lot of the time. And I would stick with him. And I must admit, I think the last 2 weeks, I know it's a risk, but what else are they going to put out there? Jacorian Bennett looks like he holds every time I watch him cover someone. Even when he makes a good coverage rep, I still think he could easily get called for PI every single time. And Adoree Jackson is Adoree Jackson. Like, if you want to go back to him, fair enough. But what's the long gain? You can go back to Adoree Jackson week 10 if you need to. Like, I don't see the need to do it now. I think Ringo is easily the most physically talented. And I think his physicality in the run game, by the way, helps quite a lot as well. So I would stick with him. I felt like after watching this game, I'd be disappointed if we don't start him tomorrow. I mean, especially against these Giants receivers, by the way. It's a great chance to get anyone's confidence up because they suck. But I would give him a chance. I take it you're on the same page, no pun intended, after watching his film this week?
Yeah, I would absolutely leave Ringo out there.
Yeah, I don't think it was as bad as people said. And yeah, good choice to cover him because Eric did such a good job last week.
Same.
A lot of it to me is technique, and it's not even technique in terms of like physically. Like, I don't think he's doing things because he can't physically handle it. I think it's just a case of maybe lack of confidence, maybe a little bit of like not trusting his technique fully. Yeah, good comment, Breaded Lips. If I only had the confidence of Mills. Yeah, he's got more physical talent than Mills, that's for sure. Right, I want to talk about, to be honest, I didn't know where to go with the defense this week, and I should have almost had like a big picture thought at the start about like, I don't really know how they played. I know some shows that were out there were really critical of the defense, and I couldn't get there. So I know some people, some of the podcasts I listened to post-game were blaming the defense more than the offense, and I couldn't get there. I think the biggest thing that we should talk about more this week was the fatigue really hurt the Eagles this week. So I want to show you a few clips of early on. If you'd literally just show the first, second clips. And to be honest, these aren't plays I particularly want to look at for any particular reason other than to show you the three guys that I want to talk about. So on this play, Moro Jomo and Jordan Davis. Jomo does a fantastic job fighting through the double team, and Davis also is very good at the point of attack, and the both of them end up making a key tackle. Then if you go to play two, I think we all know by now that Jalen Carter is not playing at Jalen Carter levels, and I think he's on the Boa injury report again with an injury again this week. So I think it's pretty clear that he is struggling. But as this game went on, right, early on, and I wrote about this for BGN, and I can't even remember the exact statistics, so go and read the BGN article if you care. But long story short, the run defense got significantly worse as the game went on. I think they were something like 3.6 yards per carry in the first half, then like 4.4 in the second half. The run defense went down. And I was watching it, and I said this on the post-game with Eric. After the Denver's first touchdown, the Eagles went 3 and out. And you can blame the defense all you want, right? They played 74 snaps. Jalen Carter, who's clearly struggled with conditioning, Shane, clearly is not really healthy, in my opinion, fully healthy. I know we don't do PFF grades anymore, because PFF grades are terrible compared to his previous years, which at least you can say there's some similarity because it's the same company grading him. He played 67 snaps. Like, he's only off the field 7 times. And you look at that was 43 pass rushing attempts. Like, that's a lot. Getting after the quarterback 43 times in a game. You look at other guys. Jordan Davis. We take for granted now that Jordan Davis can play with 50% of the snaps. He was a 20-30% player. He's playing 41 snaps. Jomo's playing 38. And then you look down the bottom. Byron Young is playing 15. And I will show one final play for this one, which is play 5. And if you watch Byron Young on this play, nothing against Young. I'm sure he's got some talent in there, but he to me doesn't look good enough. And he is replacing Jordan Davis on this play. And no wonder they can't rest Davis very much, because 60 manhandles him. Like, that would never happen to Davis. Davis might get pushed back by a double. Single-handedly is not getting thrown to the ground like that. So I'm looking at the Eagles' defensive tackle rotation. I'm seeing Davis 41 snaps, Jomo 38, Carter 67. Where's Ty Robinson? 1. And last year, they didn't trust Jalen Hunt until about week 7 or week 8. Byron Young played 15 snaps, 9 run defense snaps. Jordan Davis this year, Shane, has already played 210 snaps. His highest snap count is 561. Last year, he only did 444. He is nearly halfway to his snap count from last year, and we have played 5 games. I think part of the defensive struggles this week was run defense, and I think they were fatigued. I think we need to have a look at how we're rotating, not just our edge defenders, especially on a short week, how we're looking at rotating our defensive tackles. Because when Nolan Smith comes back, I can look at the edge room. Azeez Ojulari played well this game. Zadarius Smith's fine. Josh Uche's fine. Jalen Hunt can play snaps. I know Jalen Hunt's not playing particularly well, but I'm like, I can rotate those 5 around. I think defensive tackle might be a bigger issue than people think. And I thought fatigue was an issue in general this game, and I don't want to make excuses for everything this week on defense, because we'll get into some of the negatives later on. But when I looked at the numbers, I was thinking that's a lot to ask. That's quite a lot to ask of someone like Jordan Davis to play that many snaps. Jalen Carter has played the fewest amount this year is 48, and I don't think he's been healthy, and I don't think his conditioning is great. Again, I'm not doing the whole PFF grade thing, Shane. You know I think it's been awful at times, but his PFF grades, Carter, 87, 73, and this year, 59. It's the same company tracking him. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's purely down to fatigue. That's obviously down to health as well. But yeah, I think defensive tackles may be an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I talked about that actually last night on Birds of the Round Table, that I think the move to make is for a defensive tackle, because your edge rushers, I think, are fine. And to get an upgrade at edge rusher is going to be a Trey Hendrickson type guy that you're not going to want to move for. But there are a lot of defensive tackles that will give you a lot more than Byron Young that I think you could go get for a day 3 pick. So I'm with you. Same thing with CB, by the way. Like, you're going to have to pay a lot to really upgrade at CB. I think you can get an upgrade at D tackle for a 4th round pick, and the Eagles have a ton of those. By the way, that stat was 3.6 yards per carry in the first half, 4.95 yards per carry in the second half. So, all right, let's keep rolling along. Maybe in the process, Johnny's internet's going to catch back up to us. I want to talk about
Shane, Riverside Live might just not be me. I have upgraded. I checked before. My speed is now very fast. It seems to just hate it. I don't know what to say, man. Maybe live streams aren't for me. Join the Patreon. Nothing's live there at the moment. All recorded and hopefully fine. So sorry if I'm bugging out on the live. The upgrade has not failed. How dare you? If I can't do a podcast on, and yes, my download speed is worse in this room in the evenings. If I can't run a podcast on like 150 download and 75 upload, then there's serious problems in the world. Yeah, good comment. Good comment. Apologies if you're there live. It will all be sorted in the recording. Ethernet,
yes.
Yeah, ask the wife about that, GG. It ain't happening, my friend. Not digging multiple holes through the wall to get into here. It's not happening. And by the way, on a serious note, rather than abuse from GGN, it's Kay commenting, I think regretting the Thomas Booker trade. Yeah, do you know what? I think there's an argument that we'd be better off with Booker than Bennett right now.
Yeah,
I do. I don't know what he's doing.
It's more than an argument. It's a fact.
Yeah, I haven't looked at his numbers, but I think Booker had talent. And I'm also a little surprised. Who's the guy that was going to, Gabe Hall? If they're going to play Ty Robinson for one snap, I'm a little surprised Gabe Hall didn't hang around either. But there you go.
Yeah. All right, let's hop into my second point. I just real quickly want to show two plays and talk about rush lane integrity. It's something we've talked about in the past last year. It's not something I've talked about this year, but I thought it showed up on a couple of Bo Nix scrambles. And Bo Nix is not a particularly mobile quarterback, but he can run a little bit if you give him the chance. And he ended up scrambling 3 times for 22 yards in this game. On this first play, you're going to get Jalix Hunt drops out of the edge, and so Jalen Carter is your new edge, which means he's got to keep Bo Nix in the pocket. And just watch the rush path that Jalen Carter takes. So he's starting out in the B gap. And see how wide he rushes? Like, that is way too wide. You simply can't do that, especially, I mean, I get what he's trying to do, because you're bringing a nickel pressure off the other side and you don't want Nix to be able to escape the pocket. But you just make it so easy for him to escape the pocket up the middle there. And then he's making guys miss, juking Zach Bond and Jalix Hunt on the same play. It's rough rep there. On the next one that I was going to show, this time it's Moro Ojimo, who I'm circling on the screen right here. I guess I said I was circling him and then drew an arrow. But watch how wide he goes on this rush. Again, lined up in the B gap. See how wide he gets? And he just, again, opens up this huge lane for Bo Nix to scramble through. And it's not as big of a scramble, but it still happens. And so I think that's something that's worth mentioning, because it was a problem at times last season. And there was a period of the season where they just stopped running stunts for a while because they were losing contain too frequently when doing it. And this isn't a preview pod, but I think it's especially important to point out because, Bo Nix averages 20 rushing yards a game. And so he just basically an average game against the Eagles as a runner. But they're about to play a guy in Jackson Dart who has no receivers, who is not a particularly good thrower of the football, but does average 55 yards a game on the ground. And so the Eagles are going to have to be disciplined as they rush the passer against Jackson Dart, and they see him in 2 of the next 3 games. So quick second point for me, but rush lane integrity is something the Eagles are going to have to clean up a little bit.
Quick's good. The Eagles don't deserve a too long pod this week on purpose. From who commented it? Good comment. Breaded Lips. Yeah, I think Bourne may have played his worst game. Yeah, I don't think he was terrible by any means, but for his high standards, definitely. I want to talk about one that doesn't have film clips, actually, because there's not really a specific play I want to show. It sort of links to my first point, really, about defensive tackle depth, which is pass rush. I do not think it's a coincidence, Shane, that when you think of the Eagles' best pass rushes in this game, what do you think of? Off the top of your head, when you think of the Eagles rushing the quarterback the last 2 weeks, what pops straight into your head the last 2 weeks? What's great about that, isn't it? I can ask you a question, I can ask you a question and not hear the answer, which is even better podcasting, isn't it? What I said was, whether you heard it, is when you think of the Eagles rushing the QB, and whether you answered it or not, hopefully you did. For me, it's twist and stunts, and it's rushing 5. When you think of what Fangio wants to do, it's not rushing 5. I counted 4 really good individual pass rush reps in this game. One was Cooper DeJean, one was Zach Bourne, and the other 2 were edge rushes. There was one from Uche and one from Azeez Ojulari, and that is it. And as the game went on, you can link this to fatigue slightly. I think the Eagles tired, and their pass rush in general, like Zadarius Smith had one on a stunt, but he's not winning individually huge amounts. Jalix Hunt isn't winning really at all, if we're being brutally honest, one-on-one as a pass rusher. Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari were the only two that had decent reps this week, and I think you are seeing Fangio get frustrated because he very rarely, I think, wants to rush 5, and he's getting really creative in a cool way. In some ways, it's great for film because there's quite a few things we could show. But I think just in general, what does Fangio want to do? Go back to the Super Bowl last year. We talk about all the time with Fangio. He wants to rush 4 because you get 7 in coverage. You get 7 in coverage, and there's so much more you can do from a coverage point of view. So I think it's worth watching this week. You mentioned the preview. I'm going to get to it after this for the Giants. He will run a lot dart. If there's any questionable sort of run fits, he will be gone early. A lot of his plays are read one and go. So if the Eagles don't rush the QB well enough and they don't contain well enough, I think they'll be in trouble. I'm going to give myself a shout out. One of my favourite things, which I like to do, is one of my favourite comments actually the last couple of years, which I think is true. And I should use that fancy new tool that everyone's using to look at the numbers rather than just say what I think. I think when we face a mobile quarterback, Fangio's really good at rush lane integrity. I think when we play the middling guys, the Bakers, I will count the Jackson Dart as that, the Bo Nix of the world, the Patrick Mahomes to an extent, I think he's less worried about rush lane integrity. And it feels like some of those guys would have big games against us running the football. So I feel like if we were playing a Lamar Jackson, Fangio would be really on it. But I feel like when we're playing this middle of the pack mobile QB, because there's barely anyone mobile anymore, all QBs can run. And I almost don't think it's one area of Fangio's defense I disagree with him a little bit on. So I'll combine sort of our 2 points into one there, really. Pass rush integrity, that also links to rushing the quarterback because they can't keep QBs in the pocket for a long period of time. And that means they're not getting any like coverage sacks at the moment either.
All right. I will go on to my third point then. And I want to talk about the Eagles defending condensed runs because condensed runs were a large part of that yards per carry differential in the second half. The Broncos started to get condensed and they started to get the edge on the Eagles. And we saw the Rams do the same thing. And being condensed makes it really hard for like your nickel to set the edge because he also has to be able to defend outbreaking routes against that condensed guy, but he's also got to be able to defend crossers because a lot of times you'll condense to run crossers. And so it's really hard to be able to take away the crosser from under center play action in condensed formations and also still get outside of that guy to set the edge in the run game, which is why, a lot of under center teams go condensed. And it's almost as if the Eagles offensively were like, hey, condensed is good, but we don't do any of the things that make it work. But that's a whole separate thing. But I just have a couple clips here of condensed runs, and you can sort of see what I'm talking about. But multiple times, they were able to get the edge on the Eagles, running toss plays, getting outside from condensed looks. And I mean, that's not a huge gain, but it's an easy first down on 2nd and 3. This time you get the motion coming with you, and you're going to get a lane to cut this upfield. That's a 7-8 yard run on 2nd and 10. So that's a big run. I mean, it gets you from... You stop that, you can pin your ears back and rush the passer to now it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. And then this one's actually from pistol, and it was a little misdirection. And thankfully, Cooper DeJean is able to fight through this and get upfield because just imagine DeJean wasn't able to fight through this. This might be a touchdown. And so it's a really good play by DeJean to get out there and slow him down and force him to get outside, but you still give up yardage. And condensed runs, and these are the same plays, just looping again, but condensed runs were a big issue against the Rams, who are very good at it, by the way. And it reared its head again in the second half against the Broncos. And I think it's something that smart teams are going to look at, and it's going to give the Eagles trouble throughout the year. And that the Lions run a lot of condensed things. The Packers will do that. There's some very good teams in the NFC that this is a big portion of their identity. And we've seen the Eagles struggle against it twice in the last 3 weeks. Just waiting for Jonny to realize that I finished talking. His internet will get there in a minute or two, maybe.
Sorry, at that point I could hear you, and I think I was about a second behind. Genuine scheme question, which is...
Okay, there goes Jonny. We'll have to get him back to his. Anyways, apologies for the live viewers here. Those of you listening back later shouldn't experience these audio issues. But yeah, it's unfortunate that was my last point on the defense too, because now I've just got to wait on Jonny to get back in. I don't have anything else to talk about. Yeah, Jonny just totally not showing up for the second half of the podcast. Kind of like the Eagles offense. It would be ironic. You could almost call it artistic if he just disappears for the second half of this show about the offense. I will give him just a minute here, and then I'm going to roll on to the offensive side of the ball if he doesn't pop back in. But anyways, those are a few of the things that I kind of noticed in the game. Overall, I thought the defense played fine. I mean, it's frustrating to give up those scoring drives, to give up a 14-point lead in the second half of a game, but a lot of it, I think, comes down to the offense continually putting you in difficult circumstances. And I do think the Broncos are a decent team. I thought Bo Nix had some misfires in this game. I don't generally think he's like a great quarterback, but he's a startable quarterback. And their pass rush is good. Their run game is good. And so I don't think they're just some bad team that the Eagles lost to. I think they're a solid team. And I get frustrations with the defense, but I put a lot more of that onto the offense. Brett Eclipse asked, what adjustments do you think the Eagles could make to address the outside toss issues versus condensed? That's a good question. I think that's just really hard to do, and still be able to cover crossing routes. That's a question I'd have to think about and come up with some more stuff on. But it's definitely something they're going to have to figure out, because there's probably some zone exchange rules you can put into play to pick up those crossers and things like that without having to chase them. But it does put you in a tough predicament. Jonny, are you back?
Yeah, that was my question before I vanished. I was actually showing a tech genius there, because I could have come straight back in, but I needed Riverside to upload, so it didn't delete the podcast element. So you see, I'm actually a tech wizard. Though you may think the opposite. I don't know if you heard my question.
I do appreciate that.
I asked the same thing because I watched it quite closely this week. Did you hear my take about Puka Nacua and the Rams? Did I get there?
No.
So what I was saying was, I was wondering why that was. I was saying against the Rams, I think it was easy to diagnose why they struggled on the edge, because I think the Rams are like unbelievably good because of Puka Nacua, basically, was my point. A little bit confused as to why they were so poor this week at times. And I can't decide if it's the edge defenders. I can't decide if it's linebackers. I can't decide if it's Cooper DeJean. I can't decide if it's corners. It always feels like it's one, like it doesn't feel like an obvious fix. But it is something they've got to get better at. I don't just think it's from condensed either. I think it's just getting outside of them in general. But I think it's fair for you to point out that condensed is the other issue. Right. I have lost Shane in true story because I quit and joined my final point. So hopefully you can still see my chat. And this is great podcasting again. Remind me what the hell I was going to talk about third. I know what it is. It's going to really annoy everyone if I've not annoyed everyone already. I'm going to talk about Broncos being good, because a little pet peeve of mine. I got killed in the BGN comments this week, Shane. Oh my God, I got wrecked on my offensive preview for loving Sean Payton. He's obviously not a very nice man and not a particularly nice coach, but I was watching their offense and I was just like, it's so well coached. I've watched some really good offensive minds this year for the previews, and every week I get more sad, because I watch them and I think, we don't do any of like this cool stuff that other teams do. So just a couple of plays, and you might think, why am I showing Broncos being good? But I want to mention that like part of being a defense, and why I'm a little bit less worried about the defense than some, is that sometimes you just get beat by really good play calls and individual plays that it's very hard for Fangio or whatever to fix. So a couple of ones that stood out. Play 6 is my favorite call of the game by a mile on my film thread. Like, what do we know the Eagles run? A lot of quarter half, cover 6 or whatever. Peyton's obviously studied this. He knows they might get cover 6. So he runs the absolute dream cover 6 beater, like a post, and it's almost like a post wheel, but I guess it's like a leak from a tight end, but it almost plays out like post wheel. And it's just perfect, because you know that Blankenship's going to get done by the post. You know that eventually the tight end's going to creep out. And I actually think both Ringo and Bourne do reasonably well here. I know they don't end up making the tackle. I think Bourne in particular, he does something really clever. If you watch him, I think Bourne is so aware. When the guy runs past him, he knows he's in huge trouble here, and he just ever so slightly gives him a little grab. But there are some things they did schematically that I think was really, really good at times against the Eagles. And then there was play 13. And I saw Quinyon Mitchell coming in for a little bit of criticism, which again, I think is mad. Cortland Sutton's huge. He's a very, very good receiver. And sometimes when a QB gets hot and a receiver starts clicking, they do things like this. And he's in about as good position as you can do. That's nearly impossible to stop. Like, I don't want to be defeatist and say the Eagles defense just got bad because the Broncos got good, but I think you have to tip your cap. And I watched the Broncos a lot for the preview. I don't think Bo Nix is as bad as people think. I think he's just inconsistent, by the way. I think actually he's pretty talented when he gets going and gets in the rhythm. I think they're a really good offense. And I think in hindsight, maybe by the end of the season, the Eagles will look back at this game and think that actually, defensively, they did nowhere near as bad as people were saying. I think they were doing much, much better for 3 quarters. And I think blaming the defense for this game, which is sort of why I wanted to bring up the Broncos offense, because I think they're better than people think. And I think when they get going, I think Sean Payton knows what he's doing. And I think it's almost more credit to the Eagles that they just completely shut them out for 3 whole quarters. And they only really started losing when the offense just started giving them nothing from the other side of the field. So overall, I'm not hitting any sort of panic button on the defense. I think it's also fair to say, Shane, that last year they were just incredibly talented at defense, and this year they're not. And that happens when you lose Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, and Darius Slay in the same offseason. It's going to happen to any team. Milton Williams, leads a league of defensive tackles in pressures, and Josh Sweat's also been awesome. It's going to have a knock-on impact. If anything, I think the defense has done pretty well so far to sustain some of those losses personally.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for the defensive side of the ball. So